In front of us are the thoughts of our hero. He lives a life like a dream, where everything he has experienced is right in front of his eyes, as if it just happened yesterday. But what we are about to see is what happened before. Our hero was a knight, strong and brave, fighting an opponent with all his might. He enjoyed the battle, finding pleasure in the fight. The enemy seemed slow and he was having fun until something ruined his focus. That something was his problem, distraction. It had always been an issue for him. He just wanted to play around, perhaps out of boredom, and lost his concentration. His armor, once strong, began to break after a powerful blow. It was frustrating because he expected it. Suddenly he was soaring through the air, facing a creature that resembled a serpent or even a dragon. Anger was another challenge for him. He got angry easily, and it affected his decisions. In that moment his anger drove him to strike at the serpent with his fists. It wasn't like him, but he enjoyed the feeling of strength surging through his body. Grabbing his sword, he beheaded the serpent. Swinging his sword felt powerful and magical, but he didn't like the idea of dying, not at all. You see, he had a secret, and in that moment he blinked his eyes open again. A woman stood before him. Did he dream her up? Was she really there? She leaned in and kissed him gently, a morning greeting. Her touch was soothing and he admired her beauty. Did she watch him all along? He couldn't hold back his feelings anymore. He wanted to kiss her. But then something unexpected hit him. He was just a baby. Tears filled his eyes as he cried. His mother thought he was hungry, but he cried because he was wearing new clothes. This twist in his life surprised him. The past life was changing again. He had died before, but here he was, reborn. It was like a never-ending cycle of life and death over and over. But eating made him feel better. He realized there was no reason to be sad or upset. It was his 101st birth after all, a milestone to celebrate. Before him, memories began to flash. His life as a student, a knight, even a samurai. And then he remembered his first life in Korea, as a person named Adam. Job searches and interviews filled his days. A mundane life with an unexpected end. A sudden collision with a car. Once upon a time he was reborn for the first time. Upon waking up he found himself in the body of an infant in a totally unfamiliar family. Everything felt alien. He was in a grand chamber surrounded by opulent tapestries and furniture that seemed to belong to a different era. From then on, he began to be reborn again and again. It was like living through a never-ending loop of lives. Surprisingly, he landed in different worlds and eras, each unique in its own way. But no matter where he was, the scenario of his life repeated itself with eerie similarity. He didn't have much to boast about. He had gotten used to this repeating cycle of birth, growth, and eventual death. The rebirth that many dream of had become ordinary for him. The anticipation and uncertainty of each new life had faded. While he was drinking his milk, he gazed around, wondering where he had ended up this time. The room was adorned with torches, and the architecture hinted at the Middle Ages, yet it didn't quite match any historical period he knew of. This wasn't Earth, at least not any Earth he had learned about. Before we continue, take a moment to answer the question of the day. If you could reincarnate, what would your profession be? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out. Now back to the recap. The new environment didn't discourage him. He had become accustomed to adapting. It didn't make logical sense. Was he reborn in another world? Different time, different culture? He didn't complain though. In fact, he found himself looking forward to these transitions. He actually liked these other worlds. They were usually more comfortable. This time, as he glanced around, he noticed luxurious draperies and servants bustling about attending to various tasks. Wealth and privilege surrounded him. He seemed to be born rich this time, even with plenty of companions. That meant he was from a noble family, and his mother adored him. Her eyes held a mix of exhaustion and affection as she looked at him. At first he couldn't understand their language, but after a while he got used to it. The strange words slowly formed meaning in his mind. New worlds and new languages often confused him at first, but the warm hands and loving gaze of his mother spoke volumes. She truly loved him. He had experienced 100 different mothers, so he knew which ones cared and which ones didn't. Sometimes he was abandoned right after birth or made to work hard, but this life felt different. He overheard a maid refer to him as the young prince, and that's when he realized he was a prince. Another maid, alone in the room with his mother, spoke honestly about her worries for his future. She mentioned his imperial blood, but also how difficult his life would be. The prince's life wasn't going to be easy. Our hero, in his tiny form, wiped away his mother's tears. He wanted to show her he wasn't sad, even if he couldn't inherit the throne. He didn't care about that. Being a prince was enough luck for him. He wouldn't let clingy nobles or the pressures of the imperial family bother him. His 101st life, a jubilee, in this new world felt like a dream. The Emperor's son and the former servants, even the half-bloods, were all starting anew. This life could be good, without being consumed by politics. He dreamt of eternal trips and hunting, of carefree fun and laughter, yet he lay in his bed, making baby sounds that brought joy to his mother. Even in his happiness she was a bit sad. She wished she could protect him from everything, making his life much better. Our hero heard these words of strength and pondered over them. He realized that having strength wouldn't harm anyone, but for him it had become a usual thing. He often felt like not having a rightful claim to the throne made him weak. He believed that if he was weak, no one would stand up for him or bother to protect him. He thought that people might even find a way to push him aside. Despite these thoughts, he held on to a different belief. He didn't consider himself worth worrying about because he had lived many lives as a warrior. 3 months later, while he was asleep and his mother woke him up, she noticed something incredible. His hair had transformed into a beautiful colour. A maid mentioned that the lady's carriage had already arrived. As everyone gathered, our hero felt a sense of joy. He had just experienced an exciting dream before being awakened. He hoped that the babysitter wouldn't rush to him immediately. Since he was a baby, there hadn't been a moment of peace, and he was tired of all the attention. While he was alone, he decided to check something crucial for his future. He hoped that the Emperor's blood carried some kind of ancestral power. If it did, he wanted to learn how to use it. He concentrated, gathering his power. He understood that strength ruled the world, and being strong meant no one would dare oppose you. Drawing from the experiences of his past lives, even within a child's body, he felt he could accumulate strength. He remembered his 30th life and the techniques he had learned. He decided to try practicing skills from his other lives simultaneously. He knew no one would expect a child to train this way. Even though he was just a child, he believed he could achieve great things. He was determined to train his body and spirit, making himself stronger. He thought about how he could train even when Nanny held him. He concentrated, letting energy flow through his body. The energy started to build up, and he could feel its power. As he focused, his head began to ache, and he decided to release the energy. He didn't want to attract any attention or lose his stored power. He hoped the babysitter would leave him alone and stop touching him. Finally, his prayers were answered when the babysitter left, thinking he was having nightmares. With the babysitter gone, he felt his energy surge to its maximum. He thought he just needed to sustain it, but he was feverish. He hoped that making such a baby could withstand it all, but the thought that it was better to die than to live in a weak body kept him from giving up. He began to store up as much energy as he could. He continued his work, for it was also so he could live a prosperous life. At this point he had called out. Even the maid heard it all. She suddenly ran to his room because she thought that something had happened. Our hero was sweating profusely. For some reason she even thought that he was sleeping, so she decided to prepare a bath with herbs and then bathe him. Our hero, on the other hand, when he saw what Tam had run off to prepare the bath, got to his feet abruptly, and his eyes shone with happiness, because everything worked. The maid came running back to him, asking him how he was doing. Forever carrying him in her arms, she praised him for every little success, and all he could think of was how lucky he was that Nanny hadn't noticed all. Using the mana concentration technique, he could now easily accumulate it in his body, and he didn't even need to do anything to do that because he got stronger even when he just ate or slept. He couldn't even contain a smile on his face, and everything would just explode with happiness. After all, he could already accumulate so much energy in 3 years that it would be comparable to most adults in power, and when he turned 10, it was hard to even imagine. He was sure that no one in this world could beat him, not even if he lived 100 lifetimes. At that moment, the maid noticed something strange, a sound coming from above. However, distracted again, she noticed that our hero had this wonderful smile on his face. At the same time, he was thinking that he would get stronger and stronger so that he would soon live like a king. He could not even wait for such a moment. He longed for that day to come as soon as possible. It had been exactly 5 months since he was born. Thanks to the mana absorption technique, his physical capabilities would greatly increase, and his inner energy would already be boiling faster than all his peers. After all, everyone should have known that mana is automatically collected. Even though he was now crawling on the floor, he still didn't stop trying because soon, for sure, his power would overtake the available one. However, at this point, for some reason, he began to rise from the carpet. It was just his mother who took him in her arms. She brought him a toy that he certainly couldn't have expected to see. He just couldn't take his eyes off of it, but on noticing his mother's disappointment, he immediately started playing with it. Even though he looked like he was having fun, inside, He felt the Spanish shame about what he was doing. The maid and mistress laughed, for their baby looked so happy. But in whom was he ever born so handsome? You couldn't say our hero didn't like it. He loved being praised, but even though he knew he was handsome like his mother, he didn't show that he didn't like playing as the joyful child. This time was too short and precious. Suddenly our hero's smile vanished. He wanted something specific, something to eat. What will happen next? Find out next time by staying tuned for our future recaps. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great recaps.